por la misma razón, espero.
The United States had granted the Philippines their independence.
Kung ano man ang inyong nasa sa kaisipan,
The Japanese ravaged our towns.
The Philippines in government system and tradition.
President or David.
Washington, the capital city of the free world.
The proclamation of martial law is not a military takeover.
Just society for our people.
These are blatant lies.
I will not resign.
The issue of the tape recordings has spun out of control.
Paano nagagawin ng mga pangako niya?
Pag hindi pumunta, patayin mo rin.
God bless the Philippines. God bless our work.
Good day and welcome everyone to our podcast, Tinig ng Bayan, and I am John Manes Ginto, one of your hosts, with my fellow co-hosts.
I'm Robert Villanueva.
Let's now introduce our distinguished invited guests, shall we? Starting with Mr. Neil Dane Magbanwa, next Mr. Vince Cedric Tagolao, and finally Mr. Chefolo Reyes. Thank you to our distinguished guests for being able to join our podcast today, because we're going to discuss, let's say, some spicy topics revolving around certain academic material that explains how the Philippine state's current form is. Before we formally start the main discourse we're going to have, I would like to point out or lay out the main question or thesis that will be the guide for the topics we're going to have today. What factors explain the stability of the Philippine state in the face of institutional weaknesses? With that being said, welcome everyone. For today's episode, we would like to open the discussion of the current state of national and local politics here in the Philippines by looking at the academic works of political scientists Patricio N. Abenales and Donna J. Amoroso. Specifically with their academic work, a book titled State and Society in the Philippines. And I want to give a quick overview for our viewers and for our guests on this academic work. The book provides a comprehensive examination of the historical development of the Philippine state and its complex relationship with society. Rather than viewing the state as a fixed institution, the authors explore how political power, social forces, economic interests, and historical events have continuously shaped governance in the Philippines. Through their analysis, they reveal how colonial legacies, elite dominance, and local power structures and popular movements have influenced the country's political trajectory. The importance of studying this work lies in its ability to help us understand the current form of the Philippine state. Many of today's political challenges, from governance and representation to state capacity and democratic development, can be better understood by examining the historical processes and state-society relations discussed in this book. By connecting the past with the present, State and Society in the Philippines offers valuable insights into how the Philippine political system evolved and why it functions the way it does today. So that's for a quick overview around the academic work piece we're gonna revolve around. And now, this is where we're gonna introduce the weak state, strong society framework. And I want to ask my fellow co-hosts to educate us on what is this framework and its importance for today's discussion.
So the main topic within Amoroso and Abenales' book centers around the framework of having states and societies, which are, of course, differentiated into two types: a weak state and a strong society. So, as per the definition, the Philippine state persists not because official institutions are particularly strong, but because Filipino society often assumes responsibilities that the government fails to fulfill. These functions are carried out through patron-client relationships, local political elites, informal institutions, religious organizations, and family or kinship networks. The weakness of the state and the strength of society are not opposing forces, rather they coexist and interact in ways that sustain and reinforce one another, allowing both to continue functioning within the Philippine political system.
And I want to ask the guests about their understanding of the definition of the state. And I want to ask Mr. Neil Day Magbanwa on what his definition of the state is.
Okay, so we'll start off with the definition. We'll start with context of what we're dealing in. So the state, let's use Kay Max Weber, because the state in his definition, it fits the Philippines in accordance of his definition. So his definition is the agency of domination over a spatial area. So he's saying that, or what he's trying to imply, that his definition focuses on a strong state where it focuses over control over coercion, where there is no parang social contract, but it follows under the idea of power and control done by a leader or done by a state. So yeah, I agree that this kind of definition fits the Philippines context much so other than the different definitions provided for the state.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Neil Magbanwa. For our guests, can you agree with Neil's definition of the state, that the state is to be considered as strong?
Generally, yes, the state is one that controls. So yes, I would tend to agree.
Okay, thank you for that.
And to add to that, no, in the definition of Max Weber, meron silang jurisdiction sa isang lugar para mag-enforce ng batas, mag-enforce ng law, peace and order, while the people, they think of it as a legitimate authority, kaya sinusunod nila. So, to break it down, no, ang state, kailangan nga, yun nga, may people. Ang people, sila yung citizens ng country. Meron teritoryo, syempre. Hindi pwedeng walang teritoryo ang isang state. And dapat, ang use of force nila ay legitimate. Pwede sila gumamit ng mga pulis, ng militar, at even ng kanilang konstitusyon at ang kanilang saligang batas. Ayun nga. So, magagamit lang ng gobyerno yung force na ito kapag inaccept siya, tinanggap siya ng mga tao.
Oh, thank you for that. And I want to add an additional question. Let's apply it to the Philippine context. Can the Philippines to be considered as a strong state by Max Weber's definition, or to be considered as a weak state from the framework given by Amoroso and Abenales in their work?
In the context of the Philippines, I think that our state is kind of weak, no? I mean, the government is failing to do their responsibility. Talamak ang korupsyon na nangyayari sa ating gobyerno, mahina yung ating bureaucratic independence, meron tayong existing na spoil system, no, na nakabase pa sa historical data, and merong malaking legacy ng isang historically exploited na society. Sa corruption, syempre, nakalagay na mismo sa ating batas na kahit naman hindi nakalagay sa batas, alam naman natin masama ang corruption. Pero kung hindi legal ang corruption, bakit nagfe-fail ang government to enforce anti-corruption laws? Andito naman ng ombudsman, andito naman ng sandigang bayan. Pero kung nag-exist yung mga entity na ito, which were formed to combat corruption, bakit talamak pa rin ang corruption sa gobyerno ng Pilipinas? Bakit ang Pilipinas pa rin ay kino-consider as one of the most corrupt countries in the world? Ayun ang isa sa mga argumento ko kung bakit mahina ang state ng Pilipinas. Kasi sa corruption, for example, may andyan ng bribery, madali mong mabayaran kung yung mga politiko para magpasa ng batas na makaka-benefit lang sa'yo at hindi sa sambayan ng Pilipino. Meron din tayong mga proyekto na hindi natapos o ang mga materyales ay ginamitan ng mga substandard materials. Tapos isa pa, dito nga sa weak enforcement, no? Sa dami ng batas natin na ipinasa, may mahinang enforcement. Kumbaga, biruin mo, libo-libo ang ating batas, no? Ilan ba yung batas natin dito sa Pilipinas?
Pagkatanda ko, mga 13,000 plus Republic Acts.
13,000? Grabe, no?
Imagine mo, 13,000, no? Diba?
Sa amount ng 13,000 na yun, parang karamihan dun sa mga batas ay hindi man lang na-enforce. Kasi una sa lahat, hindi nabibigyan ng pansin. Papasa lang sila ng batas, i-execute yung batas, isa-sign. Pero after that, wala na. Parang masabi nila na nagpasa ako ng batas, may batas dyan, yun na yun. Pero ano nangyayari? Walang enforcement. Kumbaga, yung simpleng makikita mo sa kalsada na nakalagay, bawal magtapon ng basura dito. Nakalagay ba yung multa? Pero wala namang nag-enforce. Kaya minsan nga nakikita ko po sa Caloocan, nakalagay bawal magtapon ng basura, pero right underneath it, punong-puno ng basura.
Tama. Dagdag pa dyan yung bawal tumawid dito. Dami na naman tumatawid.
simple lang yan ha. Yan na yung mga simpleng
yung mga ito pa yung mga batas ng pagliliter o minsan yung mga yung mga driver na ng babribe na lang para di sila matiketan, gano'n.
Tama, no? Oo nga, yun, especially sa mga batas pag-trapiko. Karamihan dyan, hindi talaga maayos na nai-enforce. Parang minsan, namimili na lang din ng mga enforcer kung sino yung huhulihin nila. Tsaka, ayun nga, ang isa pa, napakahina ng bureaucratic independence natin kasi yung mga bureaucracy natin ay nag-ooperate sila base sa political pressure at hindi dahil sa rules ng kanilang mga departamento. Itong mga government officials na to, masyado silang nai-influence ng mga ng other politicians and ng mga powerful elites, ng mga dinastiya. At syempre ang mga epekto na ito, kung patuloy na nangyayari ang ganitong practice sa ating bureaucracy, no, magkakaroon talaga ng inefficiency at lack of professionalism, no? And mababawasan yung accountability sa mga action na ginagawa ng gobyerno. Andito rin yung policy inconsistency, no? Na yung mga programa nagbabago sa political leadership. Kumbaga, kapag nagkaroon ng official dito sa panahon na ito, pero pag nagkaroon ng bagong official, magbabago agad yung polisiya na itinatatag nila. So, medyo nagkakaroon ng parang magulo, no, yung ating sistema. At nandito rin syempre yung spoil system, yung patronage politics. Ito talaga yung talamak sa ating society. No? So, andito yung yung pag-appoint ng mga government officials, no, base sa loyalty and not qualifications. Alam naman natin na napaka-importante ng qualifications sa gobyerno. Kailangan best of the best. Hindi dapat most loyal of the loyal kasi ang loyalty parang sarili na lang na kapakanan nila ang iniisip sa ganun eh. Siyempre, oo. Kung loyalty sila nakabase, pwede nilang ma-appoint yung mga taong hindi naman kwalipikado sa posisyon na yon. Pwede rin nilang magiging masyadong politicized yung mga public institutions natin na ginagamitan na lang ng politika imbis na mag-focus sa functions nila, sa roles nila para mapaganda ang buhay ng Pilipino. Lastly, no, nandito yung legasiya ng exploitation ng society. Nandito yung elite dominance, no? Simula pa ng panahon niya ng mga Kastila, ang mga elite ay sila yung nagko-control sa ating ekonomiya at ang mga political system natin. And throughout history, we've seen the colonial rule that prioritize extractions over institution building na ni-exploit nila yung resources natin, yung mga tao natin, imbis na tulungan tayo na makabuo ng isang magandang at malakas na lipunan at bansa. So dahil dyan, nagkaroon tayo ng mga very, very weak institutional foundations na since from the Spanish period to the American period. And meron din tayong deep social and economic inequality na nangyari. And of course, yung nag-e-exist na distrust between citizens and the state.
And I want to add na may question rin ako. Let's say there's a strong leader, strong political will leader natin, yung president. Pwede ba natin sabihin, mabago natin yung estado or yung state ng Pilipinas pag nasabi natin malakas yung leader? Pero dahil sa sobrang systematic corruption na ng politika natin, ng government natin, hindi na siya nababago somehow. Ano masasabi nyo dun? Pwede pa bang mabago yun kahit may malakas tayong political will na leader na din sabing mabago yung sistema? Pwede ba mangyari yun?
First of all, there is a level of difficulty. We're talking about one political leader, right? So that may be the president. Now, if that president may have a strong political will, of course, the direction of the state might follow him. But we have to account that the different possibilities of political interests from different departments, they have their own political will, they have their own political interests, their dyadic alliances, their loyalty to one another. So even though if you have a very strong-willed president, it will be hard enough to create good and prosper actions or development for the community or the state itself or for the public, unless we have almost the majority of the members from different departments that are working for the common good or for the proper development. Now, since you said it's still systematic, we have to rely on the other powers in order for them to establish a proper development or have a proper connection that is more focused onto the will of the people rather than on the minority interest. And if that's the case, there is still a power being expressed by the president. It is going to from a weak state to a moderately strong state. Not saying that it will become very strong, but there is a progress already starting from the president's position itself. The concern that it should be recognized is if other public servants will follow to the political will of the president towards the proper development or the good development of the people. And that's going to be my answer. To conclude, it is going to have a moderate strength of a state, but it's still not enough to make it a very strong state.
The question whether a political leader with strong will to change our system would actually be successful into changing it, if you can see that a leader could initiate reforms that could sufficiently change our system, it would be a good thing for all us Filipinos if you think about it. Let's say there would be a leader na gustong ibago ang sistema natin mismo. It would be beneficial to all of us. Kasi it depends on whether they're going to actually focus on the people pag gusto nilang maging strengthened ang state. Kasi within the readings of the book, the state and society are interconnected. The state has to coexist with its society for it to prosper. So, if the leader, rather the political leader, has the will to actually follow what the Constitution defines as a state, as I mentioned earlier, the second article of the Philippine Constitution describes the state as someone or something that will follow the needs of the what do we call this? Of the people. Tulad niya sa preamble natin, a government that shall embody the people's ideals and aspirations. Ayun na mismo yun. If they could handle to do that, then it would be beneficial to all of us. But I would have to wait for that time to happen. So the answer is, of course it would work. It would work if they want to help the people to grow, if they want the people to respect the state, then it's probably time that we follow what our Constitution really wants. Is that we are a democratic republic that shall follow and embody the needs of the people. That's all, my co-host. Thank you.
If a strong-willed leader is to make a radical change in improving our current state, I believe it could be possible through the means of wise actions and wise political decisions. Meaning, he would have to surround himself with political leaders who are essentially incorruptible. Some could argue, ensure that he would not anger the current people who have great power too much. That is a certain argument, especially for those who have liberal-leaning ideologies. That is all.
And now let's transition to
the live podcast.
Thank you for that, Mr. Magbano. And now I want to introduce a new segment. I will give a key term and its definition. I want you guys to answer if it's whether it's a weak state or a strong society. So let's start this. Okay, that's a fast talk segment.
Fast talk with Mania Bunda.
Let's start with a Cacique democracy. It's a political system where formal democratic institutions like regular elections are subverted by entrenched local elites and political dynasties. Weak state or strong society?
Pero weak. Bakit weak?
Okay,
Ito na yung words na powerful political dynasties as we na-mention na natin kanina.
Pero strong society. Kasi may
Why?
mga laban doon. May mga Siyempre, in a strong society, there are what we call resistances.
What are those resistances?
Well, we have our activists that speak our voices to those who are afraid.
They are the marginalized sector. They are the voice. Hindi makaboses.
Okay.
They are the voice for our rights.
Exactly.
The voice of our rights.
Exactly.
For our future and our children. Which is why those who are conformists find them annoying.
Exactly.
Patron-client bonds are unequal, reciprocal, social, and political relationships. So, what do you think about patron-client bonds? Weak state or strong society?
Weak
course.
state.
Why?
First, you need bonds between others, especially dependency. Dependency creates weakness. In some cases, of course, in the Philippine context, it does create weakness.
But then, if you think about it, it's like what Neil said a while ago. You could say that it also produces a strong society in some
Because of
sense.
the elites?
Not because of the elites, but by the connections.
Solidarity.
Solidarity.
So,
It's
The clients.
of the clients. But if you think about it, the context of patron clients doesn't really happen only in politics. It also happens within peers, within other people. Let's say, remember what our very handsome professor, Sir Antonio Tobias, had a lesson about us on our subject in philosophy. The Filipino traditions and cultures are always family-centered, peer-centered, community-centered.
Yes.
There are no individualism is actually not a thing for the Filipino people. Culturally, we all help together. If you think about it, from my province, Isabela, I mean, actually in any other province, to be honest, there would be people helping the lolas, mambobola si lola. Mga pogi, tulungan niyo naman ako dito sa bakod ko. Tutulungan siya, di ba? Kasi yun yung bond natin mga Pilipino. We respect our elders, and since we are younger, we gain something from them, which is their trust. Yun yung parang patron-client natin when it comes to socially. Yun nga, di ba? Yung naturo nga ni Sir Antonio nun, which he keeps explaining na we aren't individuals. I mean, we are individuals, but we're individuals within a community helping each other to grow.
Yes.
So, yes, it creates a weak state kasi nga napapano tayo, dadaan tayo sa bola, gano'n
So, mix para sa'yo.
Oh, mix. Kasi isipin mo, dadaan tayo sa bola, bobolahin ka lang. Sabihin natin sa MMDA, driver.
Yes.
Nag-drive ka, diba? Nag-speeding ka.
Itatabi ka.
Itatabi ka. Kuya, sorry na. Ito, 200 kuya. Iba-bribe mo yung
Para hindi ka natikitan.
para di ka tikitan, di ba?
Oh, yes.
Yun na yung patron client natin. It takes a weak state kasi nadadaan tayo sa bola yung may pogi 500 para sa'yo, para di na mag-ticket. Hindi na, yung bands natin, malakas yung social strengths natin. Yung batas natin na, na-enforce pa? Hindi. So, in a sense, it makes a strong society, but it weakens the state.
So let's go to the next. Bossism. Bossism refers to a system of political control dominated by a single powerful figure, a boss, who leads a disciplined network of supporters, a machine. Weak state or strong society?
Weak state.
How so?
How come? Bossism. I think most of the mainstream ideologies nowadays can agree that an ideal state, a strong state, is one which is able to uphold laws of human rights. There's no state that has no rights. Even if they are racist regime, they have human rights for the race they are supporting, such as South Africa.
Okay.
So human rights include human rights really include the people's right to having a democratic government, which is control over their government. If this form of government is centered on one man, as you stated, bossism,
yes, sir,
then it is a despotic state. It is not an ideal state. It's not a strong state. It is a state centered on one man or a few people only.
It's a sign of a weak government and perhaps a sign of a strong society talaga. Weak government because they are failing to regulate these enterprises, these businesses. But it also shows na may existing na strong society Because itong mga Pilipino, let's say mga vendors, mga naghahanap buhay lamang, kumbaga nagkakaroon pa rin ng isang market within a society na informal, na kahit na hindi sila nare-regulate, they are existing and they are well thriving.
I guess it's a weak state because of course regulation is necessary for government intervention of such economic, especially since it's concerns with economics. Necessary intervention of government policies with such businesses is needed in order for both parties to positive effects, rather, I guess, in that sense.
With all the information that we discussed, with all the discussions that we had, I want to use a real-life example, a real-life case study, which is the impeachment of VP Sara Duterte, to analyze it if it's considered a weak state in a strong society.
The impeachment of Vice President kinda shows signs of a strong state, especially in the Marcos Jr. government.
I think
this is the first time that we've seen the Vice President, the second most powerful person in the Philippines, facing impeachment and impeached twice in the House.
First time.
That is something that that shows a strong state, because the state is doing its job. The Ombudsman is doing its job. The House of Representatives is doing its job. They impeached Vice President Sara Duterte once, and now it's going to the Senate, which of course, alam naman natin, napakagulo ngayon. Pero other than that, I think somewhat it shows a strong state. Kasi nga, itong Marcos administration na ito ay they're making sure that Sara Duterte, the second most powerful woman in the Philippines or person in the Philippines, the Vice President of the Philippines, is to face public accountability from her crime.
So sa 5-minute experience na pinag-usapan natin, gumamit tayo ng isang question. But then, to everyone's surprise, we have a second question na ngayon natin ipapakita.
Would you consider dismissal of the first impeachment case more legal or more political in nature? Bale yung kay
last year,
kay Sara.
I would think that it is a bit of both. It's political in the sense that if you're going to look at the forum shopping led by the camp of VP Sara to, let us say, delay or, well, it eventually stopped the impeachment. It's political in that sense kasi they try to look for ways, and the ways they look for are legal ones. So yun na may legal part, since it was the Supreme Court who released a decision, and the Supreme Court basically enumerated or basically questioned the process. They enumerated the ways that the impeachment case should proceed, and that's the reason why for this year's impeachment, whatever the Supreme Court said, the House of Representatives went through all the process, so that they will avoid the technicalities or the legalities that the camp of the VP used to stop the impeachment last year.
We look to the question that we asked, Sir Micah, if the first impeachment case to be more legal or political in nature, that we can say that it's more politicized because the current set of judges in our Supreme Court today is to be appointed by the former President Rodrigo Duterte, and by looking back at our history from former impeachment trials, lalo na kay former President Estrada yung sa kanya, and our Justice Carpio, that the definition of forthwith, which is to mean to continue, because of VP Sara's complaint to the Supreme Court of the motion of the impeachment trial to be stopped, nag-interject ang Supreme Court and to put an actual legal definition by the impeachment trial to be forthwith to continue because of yung sasabi na complaint of VP to the Supreme Court, nagawa ng definition that basically it can be said that naging politicized siya.
We all know that there is an existing separation of power, no?
Exactly.
You have the executive, the legislative, the judiciary,
the checks and
so
balances.
basically, what the Supreme Court did was a violation of this separation of power, the checks and balances.
We can say violation of the Constitution.
Kasi, they are meddling with legislative matters.
Exactly.
The impeachment itself is a matter of the legislature.
it's not their problem anymore.
Yeah, it starts in the House.
That's why,
and it ends in the Senate.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to the judiciary branch.
That's why I question whatever the legal basis of how the three powers work. Because then again, as Doc Coro said multiple times within our lectures, the judiciary is certain to be apolitical as they are objective to follow the law. But then, as you said, what happened rather, the judiciary somewhat took matters on their own hands, if you think about it. And it's somewhat disappointing, at least, that they could, very disappointing.
Because they're supposed to be balanced. Kailangan fair sila.
The fact that the Filipinos can somewhat say that Duterte being called on to the ICC be anti-sovereignty, and this being somewhat a normal day in the country is somewhat, isn't that concerning? That if you think about it, that they could call that out, but not this.
Let's summarize everything to be simple. Of course, it is the Philippines is in existence with the theory that it is a strong society and a weak state, and it's no better explanation than that. The Philippines, of course, even though it's institutionally weak with its weak government interventions, its policies, its implementations, its engagement, we still rather have a strong society to compromise such weaknesses. Of course, it may be a 0+ game, but regardless, having a strong society, especially with its resistance to the government, especially with how it reacts to the government, the strong society will help influence to create a much more stronger state than it was a weak state before.
Well, like he mentioned, we do have undoubtedly a strong society but a weak government because andyan pa rin ang corruption, andyan pa rin ang weak law enforcement ng pagpapasa natin ng batas. Like, yung pinag-usapan natin kanina, ilang libo ulit yung
13,000 pare.
13,000 batas.
13,000.
We barely see any effective enforcement from the government.
Exactly.
And we've also talked about the ineffectiveness of the bureaucratic system, the very entities that were supposed to enforce these laws, the departments and such. And we also talked about the existing patronage and clientelistic type of politics, no, na nag-exist and mas pinagpapatibay ng namamayagpag na political dynasty system dito sa ating bansa, kung saan nagkakaroon ng exploitation sa mga may hirap na Pilipino or those sa mga Pilipino na may babang educational attainment. And yeah,
kasama yun.
And yeah, we're basically living right now in a society that is continuously being exploited not just by political factors but also by the corporate, and we all know the certain political faction who's been upholding the advocacy for government transparency and accountability. Let's say the Team Dilawan or the Pink Lawan.
Progressive side.
The progressive side. We can see them siding with the administration of today because it's somewhat steps in public accountability, and that starts with Sara Duterte.
And ironically enough, it also connected the older generation to the younger generation. There has been a dyad, a communication, a discourse.
Yes.
That is something you do not see from time to time, especially in the country of the Philippines, where we value the opinions of the elder. But then now, parang nakikita tayong mga kabataan. Imagine mo yun.
May boses na tayo, especially with the technology. Mas nagkakaroon ng access ng mga tao. I think that's one of the factors dun sa tanong, no? Kung may magbabago pa. Yung technology ngayon, the amount of information, although there are bad sides kasi existing ng mga fake news, pero but every day, lalo na yung mga kabataan, mas tumatalino, mas nagiging media literate ang mga kabataan. Nalalaman nila kung ano yung fake news at sa hindi.
They have more access to literary works.
Yeah, information, more access to literary information. Much easier than before kasi dati nakikwento, kailangan ko nila pumunta sa mga library para mga ngayon, simple search na lang, nandyan na yung yung mga resibo, nandyan na yung mga ebidensya.
They may call it spoon feeding, but at least we learn more, di ba?
Diyan yung aklat.
Diyan yung mga aklat. Makikita mo na kung search mo na lang.
Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully there's useful information you can gather from today's discussion, and I'm your host, John Manias Ginto.
And you're very pogi na host din.
For our distinguished guest.
Joke lang, pero as your distinguished co-host na si Robert Villanueva. And of course, kailangan nating mga lalat ng mga pogi.
Distinguished guest.
We have
Neil Ding,
Vince Cedric, Teofilo kasi.
And by that, and always remember, palagi niyong tandaan, ang nauuna sa buhay ang may maalam sa susunod muli. And goodbye.
Thank you po. Special thanks rin mo pala kay Sir Maika. Thank you very much.